It was a hot afternoon in Denver, Colorado. The sun blazed overhead, reflecting off the chrome of motorcycles parked in front of the Army recruiting office. A group of bikers from a local gang, known as the Iron Skulls, swaggered up to the entrance with the cocky confidence only a few too many beers could foster. They were a rough bunch, tattoos covering every inch of their skin, chains hanging from their leather vests, and a look of defiance in their eyes. To them, the military was just another joke, something to mock. A group of mindless soldiers who didn't know how to have real fun. "Let's go mess with the soldier boy," muttered Brock. The gang's leader, a hulking figure with a beard so thick it could have been mistaken for a bush. He pushed open the door to the recruiting office with a dramatic force, the bell above the door ringing in protest. Inside, the quiet hum of the office contrasted sharply with the storm of testosterone that entered. Behind the desk, a young man in a crisp Army uniform looked up. Private First Class Dylan D. Carter, just 22, was as fresh as they came. He had only been in the Army for less than a year, but the discipline was already starting to show in the sharpness of his gaze, the precision of his posture. His job that day was to encourage new recruits, but he never expected the kind of confrontation he was about to face. The bikers sauntered in, their boots loud against the hardwood floor, the smell of stale cigarettes and sweat lingering in their wake. "Hey, kid," Brock grunted, slinging his arm over the back of the nearest chair. "You're recruiting people into the Army, huh? You sure you're not just some brainwashed puppet?" Dylan's hand paused over the brochure he was preparing, eyeing Brock but staying calm. He'd seen people like this before, brash, loud, looking for a fight. The thing was, Dylan wasn't just any soldier. He was a soldier trained to remain steady, to defuse situations, rather than escalate them. But the bikers were looking for a reaction, not a resolution. With a small sigh, Dylan slid the brochure to the side and adjusted his posture. "I'm just doing my job, sir," Dylan said evenly. "I'm sure you all have your own choices in life. If you're not interested in enlisting, there's no reason to be rude." Brock grinned, revealing a row of yellow teeth. "Rude? We're not being rude, kid. Just having some fun." "What's the matter? You afraid of a little bit of banter?" Another biker, Tommy, snickered. "What's it like, being in the Army? They break you down and make you into a mindless drone?" Dylan's hands clenched beneath the desk, but he refused to let the insult land. He'd been trained to endure far worse than this. But there was something about their mocking that gnawed at him. "Everyone has their reasons for joining the Army," Dylan replied. "Some want discipline. Some want direction. Some want to make a difference. It's not about being a mindless drone. It's about service." "You make it sound like a damn sermon," Brock scoffed. "What? You think you're some kind of hero? You gonna save the world, kid?" Before Dylan could respond, another biker, Jake, the smallest but the most troublemaking of the group, leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You know, I bet you couldn't even handle a real fight. You look like a kid who's never been in the real world. You sure you can handle a bunch of guys like us?" Dylan's jaw tightened. He didn't need to prove anything to these punks, but the challenge in Jake's voice made something in him snap. "Why don't you take a seat and find out?" Dylan said, his voice low but confident. He couldn't believe he'd just said that. He wasn't looking for trouble, but now there was no backing down. For a long moment, the bikers stared at him, unsure if he was bluffing or if this was just a soldier's bravado. Finally, Brock laughed, the sound booming through the small office. "All right, kid. You want to play tough guy, fine. But don't say we didn't warn you," he said, signaling to the others. "Let's go, boys. This soldier wants a lesson in real life." They turned and headed for the door, but as they reached it, Brock looked back one last time. "We'll be back, soldier. You better watch your back." As the door slammed shut behind them, Dylan took a deep breath and forced himself to relax. He couldn't let their words get to him. He was a soldier, and he had a job to do. But something in the pit of his stomach told him this wasn't over. Later that evening, Dylan stepped out of the recruiting office, the sun beginning to dip below the horizon. He had been finishing up some paperwork when his phone buzzed. A text from his best friend, Sergeant Luis Hernandez, lit up the screen. "Hey, D. You free tonight? There's a bar we hit up for some downtime. Get some rest. You've earned it." Dylan smiled, fingers hovering over the keyboard, ready to text back. But then, a familiar sound reached his ears. The rumble of motorcycle engines. He turned slowly, his heart rate picking up as he saw the iron skulls rolling back into view. This time, they weren't just passing by. They were stopping. The gang dismounted, their boots scraping against the pavement, eyes gleaming with malice. They were clearly looking for trouble now, and this time, they weren't planning on leaving without a fight. "Hey, soldier boy," Brock called, striding toward Dylan, his fists clenched. "Thought we'd have ourselves a little fun tonight. You gonna back down, or are you gonna stand there like a statue?" Dylan didn't respond at first. His mind raced. He knew he could easily take them down, but he didn't want to. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about showing off. It was about survival. "I don't want trouble, Brock," Dylan said, his voice calm but firm. Tommy snorted. "Too bad, kid. You're gonna get it anyway." Brock stepped forward, chest puffed out, his fists raised in a challenge. "This is your last chance, soldier. Get out of our way, or we'll teach you how to fight the Iron Skull's way." Dylan's eyes never wavered from Brock. "I don't need your lesson," he said, voice now cold. "But you need to understand something. This isn't a fight you're ready for." Before Brock could make another move, Dylan took a step back, his hand subtly shifting to his side, where he kept a small, concealed baton. His training kicked in, muscle memory surging as he unhooked the weapon in a swift motion. Brock froze, his eyes narrowing. "What's that? You planning on using that on us?" "No," Dylan replied. "But if you think you can just roll in here and make a mess of things, then you'll learn the hard way. I've trained for situations like this." The bikers hesitated, sensing the shift in power. They were used to intimidating people, but the calm confidence in Dylan's stance made them reconsider. He wasn't some naive recruit. He was a soldier, and that meant something. "Go home," Dylan said, his voice no longer a request. It was an order. "Before this gets out of hand." For a moment, there was a tense silence, broken only by the sound of the wind rustling through the street. Brock seemed to weigh his options, then shot Dylan a glare. "Fine," he spat, turning toward the other bikers. "We'll be back, soldier. You haven't seen the last of us." With that, the gang retreated to their bikes, mounting them and roaring off into the night. Dylan stood there, his heart still pounding in his chest, but his stance unwavering. He had made his point, and he knew he hadn't just defended his honor. He had protected something bigger. The next morning, the recruiting office was quieter, but Dylan couldn't shake the feeling that the Iron Skulls would be back. When they did, he'd be ready. But for now, he'd just keep doing his job. Because that's what soldiers did. They served. They protected. And they never backed down from a fight. Not even from a bunch of bikers who messed with the wrong soldier.